Terrorists have once again struck in Istanbul, as has tragically, unfortunately, been the case in Istanbul in recent times, this time at the Ataturk Airport, with differing reports between 2 and 3 or possibly more suicide attackers, armed with machine guns and with suicide belts, wreaking havoc at that airport. Depending on who you talk to, the death toll differs. ABC News is saying 31 dead. Turkish officials saying as many as 50 and far more than 50 injured at this point. Obviously, the situation is developing there. Aid is being rendered to those where it can, and the numbers are still coming in. But by any count from any outlet, this is an absolutely horrific terrorist attack once again striking, specifically in Istanbul. But in Turkey, there have been a number of terror attacks over the past few months. Now, Turkish officials have come out with a number of comments since the attacks. Originally, it was believed, as makes sense, that ISIS is probably linked with this, especially considering the complexity of the attack, the number of people involved in it. And Turkey is saying that all signs at this point do point to ISIS being responsible. Although, at the time that I am filming this video, ISIS has not actually taken credit, which usually they don't wait to do so, even when the attacks, like in Orlando, seem to have been inspired by ISIS, although they had no actual contact to the person actually engaging in the attack. Now, we have to take note that this is happening during Ramadan. That is certainly no mistake. That is no coincidence that ISIS would strike in a Muslim country during the month of Ramadan. They have been incredibly willing to do that over the past few years. And Erdogan, who I obviously have problems with for a number of different reasons, including his treatment of the press and minority politicians and things of that sort, is trying to inspire solidarity amongst people reeling from this attack inside of Istanbul and throughout Turkey. He says the attack shows that terrorism strikes with no regard to faith and values, and that Turkey has the power, determination, and capacity to continue the fight against terrorism until the end. Now, obviously, many people have had a lot of criticism for the way that Turkey and the United States have been engaging in their war against ISIS. In this video, I'm not going to go into great detail on that, except to say that this has become all too common an occurrence. As I said, Istanbul itself has had 5 terror attacks inside of just the last year. Now, generally of smaller magnitude than this one, but still obviously deadly consequences regardless. Now, there's a belief that upwards of 35 members of ISIS were sent into Istanbul and the surrounding area over the recent months. It's believed that they might be linked with this attack. Obviously, they are now being looked for. And there is the possibility that some of those terrorists might not have engaged in the attack in Istanbul, but might have boarded planes headed for somewhere else. So, in response, the United States has issued a blanket order grounding all planes heading to Istanbul, but also the planes that are in the air that had left at that time. And there are some that have already landed. There are others that will land in the near future, and they are all, of course, going to be gone over, including the passengers, with the strictest scrutiny. And the running theme throughout this is that this is nothing new, and this is the new normal across the globe. We are now living with ISIS being able to, because of the interconnected nature of our world, the easy access to weapons, and the fact that we have to be connected to each other, they're able to wreak havoc if that is what they want to do. And unfortunately, despite the massive success that the U.S. military and coalition forces have had in terms of killing people in the Middle East, in terms of supposedly killing members of ISIS, that is not the same thing as defeating ISIS, and even ruining their sources of income. Now, that stops their ability to govern the area that they control. It possibly means that long-term they'll be more unstable, but these attacks do not cost a lot of money to put together, and so killing the terrorists and taking away their funding, those are not foolproof ways to stop these sorts of terror attacks from happening, whether in Istanbul or Brussels or with people who are inspired by ISIS, like in Orlando, San Bernardino. The number of cities that you can list when talking about recent terror attacks has unfortunately been growing over the past year or two. But it does seem to me that the current strategy is probably not going to work. We've been making that case for a very long time at the Young Turks on my personal channel. Simply killing people is not the solution. I have a video that I might do about a study that came out that came to the surprising conclusion that killing people isn't the solution to all of your problems, especially when it makes the person doing the bombing in that area seem to be the overly aggressive outsider. It's a complicated situation. I'm not going to go into it. As always, one of the main purposes of these videos is for me to attempt to work through the emotions of reacting to the terrible news that all too often is the news that we see every day. And I feel terrible for Istanbul. It's once again, Facebook has had to put on their safety feature so people can sign in, so that their families can have some measure of security, mental security about what's going on there. Absolutely horrendous situation. Istanbul today, Istanbul too often recently, but God knows what city it'll be next. We need a more comprehensive strategy, a smarter strategy to adapt to what's been going on. It doesn't seem like that's what we've done. And honestly, looking ahead to what the United States is going to do after this election, I have little faith in either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, if they're the president, that they'll be able to ward off situations like this in the near future.